There have been a lot of slashers released up until now. Some pioneering the genre, while others stamping their name on it and pop culture alike. But there are some films under the slasher genre that I kind of tilt my head at and think to myself, if that were to be released today, would it have fallen under the slasher genre? This is what this limited series is about. I chose 7 random slasher films throughout cinema history listed under the slasher genre, and I'm going to come to the conclusion on whether or not they would be considered slashers if they were released today and under the current definition of what the slasher genre is. Warning: major spoilers ahead for the films chosen in this series. Disclaimer: this is not to invalidate any film's right to be under the slasher genre, especially because of how broad the genre itself is and the different creative routes certain franchises took to keep the films going. This series also isn't to say that slashers have to follow a specific set of rules in order to be a slasher. This is just a fun way to analyze the diverse films under the slasher genre while also coming to the conclusion of a fun question I came up with for this limited series. In the last video, we took a quick stop at the Bates Motel to analyze the 1960 film Psycho. Now let's travel to 1979 to analyze a film that was released after the elements of a slasher would be solidified by Halloween the year before. Let that phone ring and don't miss out on me analyzing When a Stranger Calls.
Every babysitter's nightmare becomes real when a stranger calls. Rated R.
The film starts off with Jill, a high schooler doing what many teens have done to make some extra cash, babysit. But little does she know, she's in for a lot more than scary bedtime stories. This film really drives home the psychological warfare the antagonist brings upon Jill in the first 20 minutes of the film. You can really feel the danger, yet nothing has been revealed. It's just really weird phone calls asking her if she's checked on the children and an intense atmosphere all the way through.
Hello?
Have you checked the children?
Robert, I don't think this is very funny.
I know just saying it makes it seem like it's not that big of a deal, but the way it is done is very disturbing. It is revealed that the call was coming from inside the house and that the kids were unalived in their rooms, unfortunately.
Listen to me. We've traced the call. It's coming from inside the house.
That reveal really drove home how disturbing the first 20 minutes of the film was and why people say this is one of the most terrifying openings to a horror film still to this day. Now, what makes When a Stranger Calls so different from most slashers? I believe it's the fact that after that 20-minute opening, it completely pivots to a different film entirely. Usually in a slasher film, we follow the final girl throughout the film for most of the time. But with Jill, she is gone after the first 20 minutes and we don't see her again until an hour and 17 minutes into the runtime of the film. To give a bit more context, this film's full runtime is an hour and 37 minutes in total. So that means we spend a total of 40 minutes with Jill and 57 minutes without her. Within that 57 minutes, we follow the detective John Clifford, who is trying to hunt down Kurt Duncan, the slasher of this film, after he escapes from a mental hospital.
Can you find him? Yes. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not this week. But I'll find him.
So we spend more time with the detective than we do our final girl of the film. We watch John do a lot of detective work to figure out where Kurt went and why. Once John finally catches up to Kurt, he realizes that he has his eyes set on another victim, Tracy Fuller. Kurt finds her in a bar and decides to stalk her afterwards and even ends up being in her house. Now, John eventually comes into contact with Tracy and he lets her know who she's been engaging with.
The coroner told him there had been no murder weapon. The killer had used only his hands.
They work together to try to catch him, but that doesn't go as planned.
Tracy! Tracy! Tracy!
The detective searches for Kurt and he eventually catches up to him, where we get a whole chase scene for 3 minutes straight.
It's all right, Duncan.
Duncan!
Without Throughout this cat and mouse game played by the detective and the slasher, we see Kurt in the mental state he is in. He is portrayed as a human killer, but not as a slasher killer, if that makes sense. Throughout the film, we see his face and see that he's a very disturbed and twisted serial killer, but not a slasher with a mask and a weapon of choice. Now, the thing that I find interesting about this film, that once we get back to Jill at the end of the film, is back to that mysterious slasher vibe that was given in the beginning of the film. So this film definitely uses the elements of a slasher for sure. It even has that one person who knows that the killer must be stopped. Like Halloween had Dr. Loomis and Michael Myers, this film has John Clifford and Kurt Duncan. However, the middle of this film gives very Silence of the Lambs to me for some reason. It leaned more on investigating and hunting down the killer rather than that slasher element of the slasher picking people off one by one until we eventually reach the final girl or survivors. Now, I will say that the vibe of the end of this film felt like Halloween and how the killer was killed, except Kurt actually died because he is seen as more of a human serial killer than a slasher once he's shot. Now, I know that there are sequels to this film. However, I haven't seen them, so I don't know if he stayed dead. So I'll just have my analysis stop at this film. Also, I promise I'm not trying to compare Halloween and When a Stranger Calls, by the way. It's just so hard not to, knowing that Halloween helped solidify the slasher film elements, and this film came out a year after that. My final conclusion is that When a Stranger Calls, released in 1979, would be a horror crime thriller. Something very similar to Silence of the Lambs, because it doesn't lean on a lot of slasher elements unless the character of Jill is in the mix. We don't have the one person stalking a group of people and picking them off one by one. We don't have a masked slasher with the weapon of choice. And the final girl that we do have is not shown throughout the film. Now, this isn't to say that this film is not a good film, by the way. I think their take on a slasher is really unique and allows it to stand out among other slashers in the genre, though I would be down for a remake that shows more of Jill in the storyline, especially because by the end of the film she had a whole family. So something like what Halloween did with this continuation, but in one film, if that makes sense. I promise y'all I'm not doing this on purpose. What did y'all think of my analysis of When a Stranger Calls? Did I get it right, or do y'all think it would still be a slasher or even a different genre? Have y'all seen When a Stranger Calls? Let me know what y'all think below, and remember to keep it kind. Thank y'all so much for watching. Peace.